Hello and welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Marantz Cohen, speaking to you from my office as Dean of the Pennoni Honors College at Drexel University in Philadelphia. Today my guest is Jane Golden, founder and executive director of Mural Arts Philadelphia, a program responsible for almost 4,000 murals in public spaces throughout the city. Golden has supported the creation of these works through wide-ranging private and public collaborations. Jane Golden, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Hi, I'm so thrilled to be here.
Well, most anywhere you go in Philadelphia, you see murals that were created through Mural Arts. And I wonder when and how you got the idea for this program, or actually for the idea of murals and then for the program itself, which is certainly so comprehensive and wide-ranging.
Well, it's a great question. I had thought about murals for a long time. I was a double major at Stanford University, fine arts and political science, thought I'd end up going to law school, moved down to Los Angeles after graduation, which is the best thing that could have happened in hindsight, because I was in a city suddenly with glorious murals. My parents had talked to me a lot about the murals painted during the 1930s, so I grew up in a mural-friendly household. I decided I would take a chance, apply for a grant to do a mural. I got this little grant. It was $300 to do a giant wall, and I fell in love with mural painting. And I realized I had thought theoretically that murals are important because they make art accessible to everyone, but standing on that corner at Ocean Park in Maine was phenomenal because people started talking to me about community history, politics, neighborhood concerns. I was a stranger to them, but the mural made them feel safe and connected. And so I started doing murals in Los Angeles. I worked with kids on probation. I then became quite ill. I have lupus. I came back east. I grew up in Margate. And when I was coming up to Philadelphia for treatments, I read one day about the good administration starting the Anti-Graffiti network. I applied to Anti-Graffiti. I wrote Wilson Good a letter. Dear Wilson Good, my name is Jane Golden. I would love to work for you. It would be an honor. And I ended up getting hired to run a teeny art component for Anti-Graffiti. And I thought, you know what? I bet the kids I'm working with would love to do murals. I went to my former boss, Tim Spencer, and he and Wilson Good gave me their blessing to do murals. And so
that's how
thus
it started.
Began the mural
so
trajectory.
From
in
the
Philly.
West Coast to the East Coast, from art history and political science to being essentially a producer of these works in Philadelphia. Fascinating that it came out of the anti-graffiti movement. Can you speak to that? Because graffiti has gone through so many different changes in the way it's viewed. And how does it fit within the mural context?
Oh, I love that question. It's so appropriate, especially today when you look at public art making and you have graffiti, street art, muralism, sculptural things, right? And they're all talking to each other and being influenced and inspired by each other. So if you look at our work, our body of work, it's just expansive now. But back then, graffiti was marginalized. I mean, it was seen like this is vandalism, and in some ways, if kids are tagging buildings without permission, it still is. But so when I was working at the Anti-Graffiti Network, what I noticed immediately was so many young people had talents and gifts that had just gone unrecognized. They carried black books. In the books were amazing drawings. They had been drawing from comic books since they were young. They had an uncanny sense of design and color and anatomy. They also had an unbelievable knowledge of abstract expressionism. So, and for me, graffiti reminded me when I would look at the pieces like abstract expressionism. So when they started talking to me about Mark Rothko and Hans Hofmann and William de Kooning, first of all, I was stunned because the kids I met initially...
The kids talked to you about Rothko and de Kooning?
Yes, who had dropped out of school in 10th grade. And when I asked them how they knew about the abstract painters, they said to me, they pulled Art in America out of their backpacks and said, we have been stealing this since we were 10. I was like, oh my God, you're stealing art in America? Like, it was such like a note to self. These kids have extraordinary talent, and you are part of a city agency. You need to do everything you can to help them, provide every opportunity and option possible. So I said to the kids, I was like, this is amazing. I said, look, Wilson Good has put money on the table to employ kids everywhere. We could do murals together. You could do something artists in America would love to do, and you could get paid to paint. And so I asked
and be
them,
seen, and have your art be seen.
You could make your mark on the city in big, bold, meaningful ways. At first, they were skeptical, but once they started working with me, we had lots of takers. Literally, thousands and thousands. We worked with probably 25,000 kids during that 10-year period that I was with Anti-Graffiti. And while it was a cleanup program, the art component just exploded because young people everywhere saw art as a lifeline, a beginning, a catalyst. And for me, it was the thrill of a lifetime. Also, for me, working in Anti-Graffiti was like getting 3 graduate degrees and how you work with cities. I learned where you make allies, how you create social change, how you start to work with block captains and communities, how you go in and ask far more questions than have them provide answers. Do not make assumptions, treat people with dignity and respect, and learn to co-create together. And when you do that, remarkable changes will happen.
So you were, in a way, a community organizer, activist, as well as an artist and producer.
Yes, in fact, my former boss used to say, the streets commissioner said a group of artists reported that the pothole needs to be fixed. Is that you? And I would be guilty as charged. That's us. Because we were like on the front lines of social change. It was really unbelievable. And we saw the mural become a beacon, a focal point, and a sign that things could change and that people cared and that government could be effective. And when we started to layer in those services, we saw changes start to happen.
So what were the dates here? What were we talking about those first 10 years?
So I started full-time. I was going to a full-time job for $12,500 a year in 1985, and Anti-Graffiti closed in 1996.
Okay. And this Anti-Graffiti then was about removing graffiti, but you were involved in putting something back.
Right. My job description was to transfer the negative energy to something positive.
Okay.
And I didn't have a desk. My title was field representative. I had an undercover police car. When you beeped the horn, the trunk flew open. It was very mysterious. And I would drive around, people would go, "Are you with the police?" And I'd be like, "I'm an artist." But we recruited
and
kids
did you
everywhere.
have
It was so
a
much fun.
cadre of kids, or kids, I don't know if they were young or, whether they were teenagers or 20-somethings, but were there a group of, I don't know, you said there were hundreds, but were there a group of 10 or 20 that were your group and that you used again and again?
Yes. We had 25, 30 kids that they were the core. They were older. They had dropped out of high school, and we worked on, they would get their, GED, and we would, find scholarship fund to get them into college. But we worked together very closely. Then there were hundreds of kids working after school, and then we had 3,000 kids working in the summer. It was sort of amazing because there was so much more government money back then, state, federal government. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was so fantastic.
It sounds like it.
And if you had met me back then, I would have been totally covered with paint, always on scaffolding, and you would have met my colleagues, Baby Rock, Cool Earl, Cornbread, Disco Duck, Knife, Pez.
This was your core.
That was my
your
core,
your
my
group.
go-to people.
Yeah. So these people then who were creating these murals, how did this happen? I mean, how was a mural done? Who decided? Did you find a space and think there should be a mural here? Did a community reach out to you? Did the artists themselves, these young people, say, "I want to paint this mural and it would go well here"? What was the logistics of that?
That's a great question. We did it, there were several ways we did it. One was that we first started driving around and just talking to people, and people said, "We don't want art. We want housing. We want jobs. This is an underserved community, Jane Golden. What do you think art's going to do for us?" It changed when we started asking people what they wanted. And people said, "Well, you know what? I went to Africa and I'd like Mount Kilimanjaro on this wall." Or I grew up on a farm in the South and I want our kids and grandkids to know where I came from. I want Malcolm X. I want, Dr. King, and we started doing that. And so we developed what is really our philosophy, that public art, if you use that term, is about creating a partnership between artists and the communities. So then, very quickly, we developed a little waiting list, and we started working with the most underserved communities in the city. And then we opened it up to the kids' voice. So in the summer, there was like youth authorship. So they got to help design their own mural, and that became a training ground for other kids. So that's how we built our art education program. You start out doing your own work. We worked at churches and rec centers, community centers, where the kids worked on easels. Wilson Good was always stunned. He was like, "I can't believe what is going on in this city around art," because everybody wanted to do art. He was like, "Yes." And then kids would help design their own small mural, and then they would work with professional artists on the larger murals. And
So
then,
they did it on a small scale in a studio or in a room, and then it was transferred.
right, and that was before we worked on parachute cloth or before computers. Computers really changed how we do
Made it
murals.
so much
So
easier.
we were gridding the wall, gridding our design, an inch on the paper was a foot on the wall. And that's how we did murals everywhere.
And that must have been a great educational experience for the students,
Oh my
too,
God.
from a mathematical and
That's right.
spatial point of view.
That's right, and I introduced them to architects and designers, and once a week we went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and every 3 months we went to a New York museum.
Really? So tell me about some of the notable early murals that you were most proud of and that were maybe most challenging to do. I don't know if they're still there. I guess I'd like you to tell me about some that were early and that are still there.
Well, there's one that I love, the Dr. J mural, that has really become iconic, and people come from all over the world to see it. It was painted in 1989.
Really?
And if you go by there, I want you to
And
imagine.
where is it?
It's at 1234 Ridge. I want you to imagine that wall covered with graffiti, trash 5 feet high. We cleared out the trash. We primed the wall, and the thing is, we had a grant from the Arts Council. It was $2,000 to do a portrait mural. I called my colleague in LA, Kent Twitchell, who's very famous. At that point, he was getting $50,000 a mural. So I called him up. I said, listen, I have $2,000. Will you come to Philly? And he said, only if I can do Dr. J in a suit. I'm like, Dr. J in a suit? Why? And he goes, because I want kids to think beyond sports. So I'm like, great. So then I had to track down Dr. J, found out he was shooting a TV commercial downtown. I got permission from Dr. J. Then Kent flew in, we photographed him, and we did this mural. And Ken had this technique where he would digitize his photographs, blow them up, project this image onto sheets of this cloth. We had never worked this way. So all the kids and we were in this room of his at International House painting little dots of color. And the kids are looking at me going, is this going to work? And I'm like, I have no idea. Well, when we started putting Dr. J up on this wall, traffic was screeching to a halt. The neighbors came out of their homes going, oh my God, look at it. People could not believe how beautiful
How
it was.
does it work then? You had this sheet where they were putting in the colors, and then how was it put onto the mural?
3 coats of acrylic gel. You have a 4 foot by 4 foot sheet. You're painting little dots. It corresponds with the master. There was a master design.
Yeah.
And then when you start to put it up, it's like photorealism. It's like Chuck Close. And it's just amazing. And the background and shadow were painted right on the wall. But what was so great was that those early murals flew in the face of what people thought would be failure. People said to me all the time, those murals are going to get defaced. The kids you're working with will end up getting in trouble again. And I felt so vindicated because from the minute we started painting murals, graffiti stopped.
Is that
People
so?
did not write on walls. Out of a collection of almost 4,000 works of public art, maybe 12 have been defaced. It's fascinating. It's because there's a sense of ownership and the work ultimately is respected and protected.
And these muralists, these young people that were involved, what did they go on to do? Have you tracked them?
Yes, in fact, I just got an award last week, and a young man who was one of our star crew members, Rocco, he's a vice president of a digital marketing firm now. Knife is a well-known poet. His work is in 100 anthologies, and Papa just bought 4 works of art from him.
Really?
Yay! Sub has a barbershop in North Philly where he says he gives creative haircuts, and he's terrific. He's got quite the clientele. I mean, Tran is a teacher. He's in the South. He just is getting his master's degree now. He fought in Iraq, got a Medal of Honor. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but there were so many kids when I met them, they had failure etched in their forehead, and they felt by 25 they'd be dead or in jail. So what I thought then is what I think today. That if we want young people to change, the adults, the people who are in charge, need to be very intentional about the kind of opportunities we're offering them. And we should offer them programs that are rigorous and offer them programs that have love. And if they're supported and you take what you're doing really, really seriously, I think change can happen. It doesn't happen easily. Life is incremental. But I learned at Anti-Graffiti, make the work substantive and do it over a long period of time. So if you're in our art ed program, you can come in at 6th grade, stay till you're in 12th grade, and then we have an alumni group, and we're going to prepare you for your next step in life.
Well, your passion for this is palpable. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
So the making of these murals, I would imagine the logistics are complicated, and there may even be dangers involved. I mean, these spaces are so large and so high. I mean, what kinds of precautions do you have to take to make sure that no accidents happen?
Well, one thing, when we became Mural Arts in 1997, we were suddenly a pro art program. So within a 5-year period of time, we realized we need to start getting the best supplies we can get. So research is key. We need to be OSHA certified. Everybody goes through trainings. We need to be just top notch in every way. And over the last 8 years, our practice has been expanding tremendously. So we're called Mural Arts, but it's really community-based public art. We're doing sculpture, fresco, glass. We're working with people in the theater community, dancers. We just worked with the American Composers Forum. You know, I really feel the sky is the limit. It's, for us, redefining muralism in the 21st century. That really makes our hearts sing, and building out our programmatic work.
These community ties are extraordinary.
Exactly.
Has there ever been opposition or criticism from the community? I mean, obviously, it's like any work of art. You know, a painter makes a portrait, and the person sitting for it may not like it. And I wonder if you've had any of that kind of pushback from the community.
Well, you know, in the beginning, during the anti-graffiti days and early mural arts, the public art community pushed back at me because it was like, murals aren't really public art. But see, the world has changed to our advantage. One, there's a huge emphasis on social practice work now. All museums are calling us for advice because process has suddenly become very important, not just the object. So that's changed. And also how all the different disciplines look and talk to each other. So actually, it's just, there's a total shift. So what was once seen as something negative is now seen as something really positive and interesting and exciting. So that's good. But you raise a good point. Doing community work is not easy. And how do you build consensus? I keep thinking in my next life, I'm going to work for the UN, because in this life, you're always going, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? But it's tricky. Some projects have come very close to failing, and we have to be okay with that, because I feel we should be an organization that takes risks, that embraces creativity and innovation, and if we fail forward, and we learn from it, and we move forward. So there's a project we did in Kensington, and we tapped into a chord of racism, actually. And it was very difficult and very challenging. The project was about the impact of juvenile crime and and it showed kids going through transformations, and it had a very triumphant end. But people in the community said, some people said they wanted a happy mural. They wanted a mural about the history of Kensington. They didn't want that mural, an issue mural.
Even though it had a happy ending.
It had a happy ending. So, but we had community meetings. We thought this was clear. But the people who didn't want it really didn't want it and threatened to paint it out. So we hired a Quaker mediator. Hundreds of people came to the meetings. The meetings were difficult. In the end, we negotiated, and we added some people who were appropriate, that should have been added. We felt like really good about those choices. And I remember, like, during the turmoil of it, hearing a theology professor from Princeton talk about, he had worked in Bosnia, he said, you know, the hardest thing for us humans to do is understand another person's perspective.
Yeah.
But when we do, we enter into a state of grace. And I felt that mural, in some way, made us all enter into a state of grace.
That is such an interesting story, because the mural then became a community endeavor in its content.
And what our work does, in some way, is it shines a light on diversity, but it lifts up our commonality.
That's great. So tell me about a few of the murals that we're going to project that are notable in the city. And if you could just tell me about them, where they are, and what is significant about them for the community and for yourself in having helped spearhead them.
Well, one, I think, is just so famous, and that is Common Threads at Broaden Spring Garden. And I just feel like it was so important. It was painted in 1998, and it really showed people that murals are the same quality as work you see in galleries and museums. It's by Meg Saligman. It gives kids the dignity and respect they deserve, but it also really very carefully took into consideration context. The architecture in the mural matches the architecture of the building. It's just lovely. So I really appreciate that one tremendously. There is another beautiful one by Meg, also at 13th and Locust, and it's about it's a tribute to the arts in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And, you know, being an artist, I love to see the arts lifted up in all their glory. And it's there's a parking lot next to it, and at night the lights are arranged.
I live right near there, so I see that one,
yeah,
and
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And then close to there is the one on Spruce Street that is was a tribute to the gay community. Was, you know, really the first mural about gay rights, lifting up and shining a light on gay rights.
And that's a very political mural, I think. You know, in the
is.
way it is structured and so forth, it
Yes.
strikes me that way.
That's exactly
like
right.
an old Union mural. You know, it has that same feel.
It does.
You know,
That's
the
very insightful.
Yeah, the WPA sort of feeling about it. I find
Exactly.
it very interesting to look
And
at.
I just remembered what because sometimes when you go to give voice to a community that has felt pretty invisible and marginalized, it's not like it's an easy process. I mean, the design process can take months to get everyone to feel okay about this, and that did. But then when it's dedicated, it's this glorious moment of people coming together and really being able to have tapped into a collective imagination, which I thought was fantastic. There's another mural that I love personally. It's at 4th and Berks, and it's called Personal Renaissance. And it was the very beginning of our Porch Light program. We have different divisions at Mural Arts. We work with the Department of Behavioral Health, and we use art to overcome the stigma of mental health issues. We also use art to tie into people's treatment plans and programs, and we use art to tie people back to the community and their family. And when we started working, it's a methadone clinic at this clinic, the wall was like gray and foreboding. Oh my goodness. And the community and the clinic were at odds, and we decided to take over the basement, turn it into an artist studio. We ended up working with 1,200 people in recovery. Many people said to me, I feel like an artist. I no longer feel like an addict. And the people that worked on that, many of them have stayed involved with us to this day. That project was so successful that we applied to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We got a $500,000 grant. We leveraged that. We turned it into the Porch Light program, where we embed ourselves as provider agencies around the city now. So it was really a critical project. And then there's another project that I love. It's a little one, and it's at like 3rd and Cherry on the, it's the Center for Art and Wood, and it's beautiful. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. And it's created by people in our guild program. We have a reentry program where we train people in building skills, mural making, design, technology, and then we reclaim public spaces. We do a lot of recreation center transformations, but we also do beautiful works of art around the city.
So that reentry program, I had heard that you did work with Graterford, with the prison. So is that connected to that? Tell me about what you've done with Graterford.
Well, with our restorative justice program, we work in several prisons. Graterford is one of them. We've actually worked in Graterford for 12 years. And we work in a women's prison and a couple of the Philadelphia prisons, and then we have our reentry program. So we start working with people when they're behind the walls, and we see them when they come home. And that really is great. We have like a 12% recidivism rate. The national average is about 65%.
So you deploy them to work on the murals. Do they get paid for that?
They do, for 9 months. And then we have a jobs developer on staff and a social worker. And they work with the men and women on the teams. So when they finish working with us, they have somewhere else to go. And they're ready for a job because we have prepared them for that. But I think the powerful thing here is that people are, as they are changing personally, they are changing the built environment of Philadelphia. And that is such a win-win. People come up and they go, oh my God, this is a miracle. I'm like, this is not a miracle. This is just good thinking on behalf of the citizens. It's not extraordinarily expensive, and it makes sense. So many of our constituents articulate themselves through art. They want to make a difference. They realize that they've done something wrong. This is a way to make amends, to learn skills, to give back, and to be able to start to propel yourself forward. And then we work in Graterford, and we work a lot with lifers, but they have extraordinary talent. And
are there murals inside the prison?
Yes, we have murals all through the prison, and soon there's going to be a new prison. And the superintendent has said she wants new projects everywhere, and we are going to do it. But what I love about Graterford is that every year the men are creating 24 murals on parachute cloth that are embedded on walls throughout our city.
That's great. That is great. So what about how Philadelphia, the Mural Arts Project, has influenced other cities? I know you're a consultant now in New York City. To what extent is this a model for what's going on elsewhere?
It's a huge model. We're in conversation with 200 cities across the United States and a dozen cities globally. We are, and this came out of our strategic plan, we are in the process of creating a civic institute, a mural arts university, where we will be formally working with cities around the world and creating an innovation center at Mural Arts so people can learn about best practices. We're also the laboratory for 3 new graduate programs at Moore College of Art, and I teach at Penn.
Oh, really?
And I'm hoping to cook up something at Drexel.
I want you here at Drexel. I think that this would be a wonderful honors course or program or workshop or some such, because we are doing a lot with the community, as you know, through Dornsife, and this would be a wonderful adjunct to that. I think what's so interesting is the way these murals not only have the community aspect, they're the art aspect, but they'll take a shabby area of the city and make it beautiful. I mean, you don't have to have fancy buildings and all the things that we consider to be affluent in some areas. You can just put a piece of art there and it raises that area to a level that's just as good as other parts of the city.
That's right. I mean, we forget sometimes that beauty is profound. It really,
Yes.
we
Yes.
have a desire for beauty in our lives. It's why we go to galleries and museums. It's why we hang art on our
We're
walls.
hungry for beauty.
We are.
And I think you've tapped into that. You are such an inspiring individual.
Oh, thank you very much.
I really love hearing you, and it makes me want to definitely get Drexel and my college involved with what you do.
Well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jane Golden.
Oh, this was so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it went by like a quickly.
It did.
And thank you for being here today at the Drexel interview.